Good morning, Central Illinois, and welcome to the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai. Our first guest this morning is State Senator Steve McClure, who joins us by phone. State Senator McClure, thanks for coming on.
Of course.
Yeah, and this is perfect timing to have you on today. We've got the governor's annual budget address happening today at noon, and I do actually want to tell our listeners we will carry that for you live here on WTIM, your information station, so tune in around noon for that. State Senator McClure, of course, that budget address going on today. What will you be especially looking out for from the governor?
Well, the governor in the last couple of years has really turned the address into a political spectacle, and that's not been a good thing. Last year he called Republicans, or he compared Republicans to Nazis. He essentially likes to criticize President Trump. He likes to criticize former Governor Rauner as well, instead of focusing on solving problems and trying to figure out how to tackle our difficult financial situation as a state. Governor Pritzker's been playing a lot of politics. So I'm hoping that today, although I know that my hope is not going to amount to much of anything, because Governor Pritzker has just kind of been doing this for years now. I hope that Governor Pritzker tries to focus on solutions and where we can go together in a bipartisan way as a state, instead of focusing on attacking people so he can raise his national profile to run for president. We've got some very big financial issues right now, and Governor Pritzker told us last year at this address that we've got to tighten our belt, and then he introduced the biggest budget in the history of our state and signed into law the biggest budget in the history of our state. So he says one thing, does another, and the politics in the middle of all this is not really helpful, because we've got real problems that need to be tackled, and he's not done a good job of tackling those problems.
In terms of those problems, that you mentioned it at the end, what are some of the things that are kind of jumping out to you that you hope will be addressed in whatever way you want addressed at the speech today?
Well, if you look at our state, we have lost a lot of people that have decided to move elsewhere, and the people that are coming into our state are in large part immigrants. So we want to grow as a state, and that is a good thing to grow as a state instead of losing population. And the governor is causing a lot of people to move because of his tax policies, because of his anti-business policies, and because of rampant crime across our state. So I think those are some major areas that need to be addressed. One thing that you can see in other states that are financially much more sound is that they're keeping their population, they're growing their population. And when you grow your population, taxes remain sort of steady. And the amount of taxes that are collected amount to having, in some cases, having surpluses and not causing any financial hardships on the citizens because taxes don't need to be raised. Well, in Illinois, we're losing so many people. And when you lose these people, you have to make up for that revenue. And so that causes, of course, all of us to pay more in property taxes, causes all of us to have to pay more in tax increases to try to balance the budget, because of these holes left by people that, were residents here last year or 5 years ago or whatever, that have gone elsewhere. And so the climate right now has to be one in which we can grow and encourage people to come here. One of the big issues that I hear about all the time from people is the high energy costs. And the governor signed another energy bill causing billions of dollars in new increased fees. And the bill also eliminated protections for consumers. And that's really a problem. We used to have, when Governor Pritzker took office, we used to have some of the lowest electricity rates in the Midwest. Now we've got some of the highest electricity rates in the Midwest. And that causes businesses to leave, and it causes also us to have a much more difficult time recruiting businesses, because that was one of our main talking points to get people to come here was, hey, build your business here, it'll grow here, and you'll get cheap energy. Now, that's not the case. And in fact, it just seems like the governor is allowing this to get worse and worse and worse, and that's a real problem. So if we can hear something today about how he's going to turn that around and start helping us with our energy costs and making them more affordable, that would be a good thing. Workers' comp reform is certainly a good thing as well that businesses talk about. And of course, our tax burden is among the highest in the nation. And if he wants to address that, that would also be a very good thing. Because the more people that come here and the more people that want to stay here causes all of us to pay less taxes, because the more people paying in, that takes care of our thresholds that we need to meet to pay our bills.
And you were talking about the population movement. In fact, we actually ran a story today on WTIM about a statement by your colleague in the representative or in the House, Brad Hallbrook, who is from Shelbyville, and was talking actually about the population movement, people leaving for states like Indiana and Iowa. And so it sounds like from what you've said, you've kind of seen, data, or heard at least about people, moving out of the state, and the financial implications that have come as a result, it seems.
Yes, and people don't take that into account all the time. The fact that when your neighbor moves away, well, somebody has to make up for the fact that your neighbor was paying a certain amount in taxes that the government was counting on in order to meet its threshold for paying bills. And so we need to keep people here. We need to encourage people to come here, and that's one thing that Governor Pritzker has really done a terrible job with. And if you've got a governor who really kind of blames everybody else for the things that he's responsible for, and then when you point out how many people have left our state and that people are still leaving our state, and he blames that on fake, he says it's fake news, it's not real, and etc. That's a real problem. I mean, we lost, and we're gonna continue to lose, by the way, seats in Congress because of population loss, and while other states are growing. And so if Governor Pritzker doesn't take this as a real problem and actually if he doesn't try to address it, we're going to be in worse shape financially. We're going to be in worse shape as far as the impact that we're going to have as a state as we continue to lose congressional seats.
Now, I know being in the minority party in the General Assembly and not having the governor's seat will certainly make this a bit of a tall order. Do you see any levers that you might be able to pull as the minority party to, maybe at least get some of the things that you're hoping for in the budget?
That is going to depend upon how controversial the budget is among my colleagues in the Democratic caucus, because there has been infighting. There's a fight over what money goes where, what the budget priorities are. And if there's a lot of infighting, depending on what the governor says today, that certainly could trigger Republicans having more of a seat at the table this year during budget negotiations. If the governor proposes a budget and fights for a budget that takes care of all of his Democratic friends, then I think Republicans will be less influential on the budget. And every year we always extend our hands out, and we always want a seat at the table. We've always been a part of the negotiations up to a point. But in the last few years, the final budget really has been without much Republican input at all. And that's been certainly upsetting to not just me and my colleagues, but my constituents. And the problem, of course, is that we've got these extremely gerrymandered maps, not just for the Senate seats, but the House seats, and also, of course, our congressional seats. But and those maps are not going to change for a few years at least until the next census, and they make it really, really difficult for Republicans to get enough seats to have enough people to have a seat at the table, and that's really unfortunate. It's bad for government. It's bad for the state as a whole, because I think the state operates much better when you've got a healthy amount of Republicans, a healthy amount of Democrats, kind of negotiating things and compromising. That's not what we're seeing right now. We're seeing one side with way too much influence and power and maps that will help them stay in power. And it's just not been good for the budget. It's not been good for bills that have passed. And it's not been good for state government.
You shared quite a bit there on your thoughts on the budget and everything else that's going on. Any final thoughts you want to share before we go to break?
No, I just, as I'm sitting in the chamber today, I just hope that the governor decides to be respectful and not, outrageous like he was last year, but we'll see what happens.
And that is a part of the budget address today. And as mentioned earlier, we'll have that for you live right here on WTIM, your information station. Right now, I'm talking with State Senator Steve McClure. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some legislation that you were involved in, and we'll hear your thoughts on that as well. That's after this break right here on the WTIM Morning Show on your information station.
Your information station, WTIM.
The Taylorville Tornadoes are on WTIM. Listen on air or online for all football, boys basketball, and playoff games of both teams on AM, FM, and streamed on the WTIM mobile app. Sponsored by McClure Halberg Insurance, Prairie Farms Dairy, the senior citizens of Christian County, and Taylorville Community Eye Care.
Purple and gold are coming your way. The Taylorville Tornadoes are going to do it today.
Find out all the great things happening in the Pana area on the WTIM Pana Morning Show, Tuesdays from 8:40 till 10. You'll hear interviews with Pana area community, nonprofit, and business leaders each week. The WTIM Pana Morning Show is brought to you by these sponsors.
Pizza Man, Noren's Hardware, Bob Riding's Pana, and Okanee Chop Shop.
$1,867.
That's how much you save on a brand new furnace and AC from Jansen's Heating and Air.
That's 7,467 quarters.
We negotiated a rock bottom price on a warehouse full of fully warranted, high efficiency furnaces and air conditioners.
But instead of keeping the difference, Jansen's is giving you the rebate of $1,867 or 37,340 nickels.
Sure.
These are brand new factory fresh comfort systems, and they're flying off the warehouse shelves.
When the last one's gone, this offer is too.
And yes, they will sell out.
Save $1,867 today at Jansen's Heating and Air.
That's 186,700 pennies.
They're not making pennies anymore.
Oh, right. Save 280,000 yen on your...
Just stick to dollars.
Fine. Save $1,867 on your new complete comfort system from Jansen's Heating and Air.
That's better.
JansensHeating.com.
Nicole Patrick here, your local country financial representative at 1305 West Bresser in Taylorville. I'm proud to recognize the Lady Tornado student athletes that represent our community by being the exclusive sponsor of the ILSportswire.com Taylorville Lady Tornadoes Player of the Game this school year. At the end of each game, a Lady Tornado will be selected to receive a certificate for being named our Player of the Game, and they'll be featured in a highlighted reel on the ILSportswire.com social media platforms. Best of luck to all the girls' teams this season, and go Lady Tornadoes!
Pastor Brian Moore here from Locust Grove Church near Assumption. We are alive and so worth the drive. Find directions to our church and watch our video podcast by clicking our icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
WTIM AM, FM, and online on the WTIM mobile app and Amazon Alexa is your ag information station with over 8 hours a day of agriculture programming and our own local farm broadcaster. Tune in to WTIM, your ag information station.
Your information station, WTIM.
Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and the landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai, and I continue my conversation with State Senator Steve McClure, who is talking to us over the phone, as we're just hours away from the governor's annual budget address, and that's pretty much all we talked about in the first segment. I do want to get to some legislation that you actually were recently involved in. You you unveiled it with some other folks in a press conference recently, and it has to do with domestic violence and helping victims, holding abusers accountable. I know you've discussed it at length in a number of settings. I'd love it if you could just highlight for our listeners what the legislation is about and what it does.
Sure, Reed. So I was a part of a press conference that touted our Senate Republican package to combat domestic violence. And a lot of people don't realize the numbers are really bad and they're getting worse. Between 2022 and 2024, for example, the amount of domestic violence deaths increased by 140%. So we have a really bad problem. And I was there with a constituent of mine who has gone through horrible abuse. And she has gone through the process of getting a order of protection against her abuser. And the abuser continuously violated that order of protection. And even though he was released on, he got charged with a felony case in 2024, released, and then in 2025 charged with another felony case. And then he is charged with 3 different violations of an order of protection. And what is most troubling about orders of protection violations right now, or order of protection violations right now, is that it's a misdemeanor. And so, a person to get an order of protection has to go to court, go before a judge. In some cases, they hire a private attorney, and they have to take all these steps. And then when the judge signs off on it, if the person that they are supposed to be protected from violates that order of protection, it's just a misdemeanor. And I'll just, to put things in perspective, Reed, if a person walks into a gas station and steals a candy bar, that's also a misdemeanor. And, we're seeing that the data on people that are violating orders of protection and in general not complying with the court can sometimes be very, very dangerous. And certainly it's a sign that someone's very dangerous if they're not willing to cooperate with court orders in cases like this. Domestic violence is, one of the most terrible things that we read about almost on a daily basis, unfortunately. And when you've got someone who is willing to come forward to get help and also try to get protection, and the state fails them, I think that we have a duty to protect them in those situations. And so my legislation makes it so that instead of it being a misdemeanor, it's a class 4 felony on your first violation. And then if you violate an order of protection for a second time, then there's an increase there on the class of felony. So I think that my bill, if passed, would reflect how serious it is if somebody violates an order of protection. I think it'll protect victims better. And I think it'll make people less likely to violate those orders of protection if they know they're going to go to prison if they violate these orders of protection, or at least they have the potential to go to prison. And so that's kind of my part of the package. We also have several other bills that were presented by Leader John Curran and Senator Darby Hills. I'm a co-sponsor of those bills as well. So we're hoping to get hearings where we can talk about these bills and get testimony and sort of make our case in the General Assembly as to why we've got to make our laws do better when it comes to protecting victims and going after people that are breaking the law.
Well, thank you, State Senator McClure, for sharing that about your bill. And thank you also for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and that is State Senator Steve McClure from Springfield talking ahead of today's governor's annual budget address. Again, we'll have that for you live right here on WTIM, your information station. Our coverage will begin right around noon or maybe a few minutes afterwards. Stay tuned. More of the WTIM Morning Show coming up.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville.
96.1 FM Taylorville.
107.5 FM Shelbyville.
107.9 FM Pena Nokomis.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. Social media addiction is alleged at a trial that will see Facebook's co-founder take the stand today.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to testify Wednesday in Los Angeles in an unprecedented trial in which a now 20-year-old woman claims her early use of social media addicted her to the technology and exacerbated her depression and suicidal thoughts. Meta Platforms and Google's YouTube are the two remaining defendants in the case. TikTok and Snap have settled. At a congressional hearing, Zuckerberg apologized to families who say their lives have been upended by tragedies caused by social media. But a Meta spokesperson says the company strongly disagrees with the allegations in this lawsuit. I'm Donna Warder.
Police say the man was headed straight for the U.S. Capitol when he was stopped